Hi everyone, and welcome to Jane Talks Murder, where I'll be talking about and reviewing an episode of Poirot, Murder, She Wrote, Diagnosis Murder, or Jonathan Creek. Today I'm going to be looking at Poirot, the Dream, or as I like to call it, that time Poirot didn't eat all the pies. We begin the episode with some jaunty music over an old-timey advert for Farley's Pies, and this is giving me Willy Wonka vibes. This guy, straight out of Mary Poppins, wanders through the factory and makes a rather passive-aggressive speech to his employees. And I'm sorry, was this extra not on her mark? This running lady, who was Anita in the live-action 101 Dalmatians movie, proper sucks face with this dude, who has been fired by Joanna's father, and she gets mad and threatens to kill him. The mayor opens a new wing of the factory. Yes, you all poke those pies, while Miss Lemon gets annoyed by her busted typewriter, which Poirot refuses to replace. Hastings discovers a letter from Farley's secretary asking for help, which he reads to Poirot, and he declares that Farley's pies suck. The pair go the following night to the factory, but Hastings is not allowed in, so Poirot goes alone to meet Mr. Farley himself. The meeting looks more like an interrogation, but nevertheless, Farley tells Poirot about a recurring dream he has, where he goes to the window of his office and shoots himself at 28 minutes past 12. Poirot says that's nice, but it has nothing to do with him. But Farley suspects someone is hypnotizing him. Poirot is intrigued but can't do anything without further information, so Farley dismisses him, asking for his letter back first. Farley takes it, but moments later Poirot realizes he gave him the wrong one, and Farley gets mad about it, making his voice change. Poirot relays to Hastings that this is all very weird, and the next day Farley ignores his appointment with these dudes and they complain to Hugo, who agrees to find out what's going on, but quickly comes running back out of the office in a panic. Miss Lemon is complaining about her typewriter when the phone rings and Jap reports that Farley is dead by self-inflicted gunshot. Joanna thinks the dream thing is bullshit. Wait, I know this lady, she was in Jonathan Creek. And Jap takes Poirot to the crime scene and he noses out the window. He recounts what Farley told him about the dream and says it's probably self-inflicted, but Jap points out if Farley requested Poirot's help, then it's probably murder. After a lot of fencing, Joanna says her father was a dick and now he's dead, so she'll inherit a small fortune, so she's a pretty big suspect. But Poirot is more interested in Farley's eyesight, which Joanna tells him was garbage without his glasses. Speaking of, Poirot wants to know how many pairs Farley had, 3 or 4 according to his wife, and then bugs Hugo in his office, the same one he met Farley in, and notes his window looks out in the same direction his boss's office does. This wall design looks kind of vulgar, but I love this flower arrangement. Poirot says it's murder, but won't give details to Jap because he doesn't have any, and he angrily paces back and forth because he can't figure it out. Miss Lemon gets mad at her typewriter again before Poirot asks her the time, so she leans out of the window in order to see the church clock, which gives Poirot an epiphany, and he's very excited about it. Poirot and Hastings get a tour of the factory from Mr. Tremlett, who mentions that Farley always knew if they were running behind schedule, despite rarely going to the factory floor, and afterwards Poirot gives Hastings a gun before meeting up with all the suspects and taking them into the office. He says the dream is the most vital part of the case, and Farley met Poirot in Hugo's office because there was something in his own office he didn't want him to see. Poirot says he accidentally gave Farley the wrong letter that night, but he didn't notice despite looking right at it with his glasses on, which means it wasn't Farley at all. He was in his office, and the person he met was someone who couldn't see through Farley's glasses. What are you doing, Hastings? Poirot takes them all into Farley's office and points out that Farley knew if the factory was behind by leaning out of the window and checking the steam pipe, and he invites them all to do the same, where Hastings shoots into the air. Poirot accuses Hugo of shooting Farley from his office and says it was he who dressed up and told Poirot about the dream. And why? Because he and Mrs. Farley were lovers. Ooh, she's mad. Hugo does a runner and takes a slow fall down the stairs with Hastings. How can a pot be both bouncy and shattery? Herbert rides up. I full on forgot he existed, and he tackles Hugo to the ground before agreeing to marry Joanna. And Mrs. Farley is salty about the whole thing. Back home, Poirot brings a package to Miss Lemon, but it's not a typewriter, it's a clock and some scary eyes. Okay, I am familiar with this episode. I remember the story and the victim as well as the way it was done, but I couldn't remember who the killer was. Having said that, I quickly worked it out due to the trail of clues that were cleverly left, and it was nice to see so much personality and expression from Poirot as he solved the case. I like when these shows hint at something supernatural but explain it away with something grounded, like the seemingly prophetic dream. But my problem with this story is the motive. It's a bit blah and comes out of nowhere. For a story that established its components really well, there was absolutely no hint at the relationship between Hugo and Mrs. Farley, so the reveal was rather bland and nonsensical. Mrs. Farley isn't really established as a character, she doesn't even have a name, and we spend little to no time on her throughout the episode, and yet she turns out to be both the motive and the accomplice, although what exactly did she do? Poirot doesn't explain, he just says she was part of it. I don't think that will hold up in court, dude. I feel like I didn't really know half the characters' names, they were just kind of there, not really introduced or talked about much, and I completely forgot that Rupert even existed, even though his and Joanna's story was talked about the most, so on the whole, I think it was a weaker episode. The murder and method were the most interesting part, but I'm getting vibes of Jonathan Creek. The Eyes of Tiresias involved a businessman who calls a meeting but leaves them waiting, only for the businessman to be discovered dead having been shot. Sound familiar? I wonder if that episode was inspired by this one, as it feels very similar. Am I a fan of this one? No, not really. Is it memorable? Perhaps, but Poirot was on point in this one with some great face acting from David Suchet, and of course we got that Miss Lemon sass, which elevates even the most mundane of episodes. We have one victim, Benedict Farley, who was shot from the office window next door by our killer, Hugo Cornworthy, because he wanted to run off with Farley's wife. So there you have it. That was The Dream. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, or come say hi on social media. If you enjoyed this video, then please hit that like button, it really does mean a lot, or consider subscribing if you want to keep investigating with me. Alternatively, feel free to check out my other YouTube channels. Thank you so much for watching, I'll speak to you soon, and keep an eye out for clues.